You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Hello, I'm Steven Willis from the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. He is Brad Logan from Inside the Rebels, Logan Digital Media. Basically, he's all over the state of Mississippi covering high school sports, and he's everywhere. Anyway, how you doing, Brad?
I'm doing very well. I thought it was interesting, and we'll get into yesterday, but if you're going to ask me the grade in regards to what Ole Miss got, specifically Lane Kiffin, anything other than an A, I think I'm going to disagree with, because I thought it went really well for Ole Miss, and specifically Lane Kiffin. I thought he was fantastic yesterday.
Yeah, it was a situation going in there. I think Ole Miss won the offseason this year for whatever it's worth, through the transfer portal and all the hype from the Peach Bowl all the way up until yesterday. And Lane Kiffin got on stage. He was absolutely phenomenal. I agree. He's an A or an A plus, extremely comfortable. Whenever you saw the national media gushing over Ole Miss sports, with the exception of Paul Feinbaum, and we'll get to that in a second, it was honestly, listen, Brad, I grew up watching Ole Miss football in the 80s. I need a little bit of anxiety in SEC media days thinking about Ole Miss football, and there was no anxiety yesterday.
No, it wasn't. And we had a chance to hear from Lane Kiffin on a couple different platforms. You had the main platform, and then you had the platform kind of off to the side. You had the one-on-one interview with the ESPN folks, and then you had the interview with Paul Feinbaum. Now, to everyone that can remember, a couple of weeks ago, Barry Trammell is with the Tulsa World, and there was a conversation between Paul Feinbaum and Barry Trammell. And for whatever reason, Paul Feinbaum felt it was a great opportunity to go all in on Lane Kiffin, saying he wasn't very funny on social media, just took a couple of pot shots. Well, that kind of went viral, and the Ole Miss fans pounced on Paul. And anyway, fast forward to yesterday, Paul had a conversation with Lane. He didn't apologize for what he said. Lane's looking at him. Paul's looking at him. One of the most uncomfortable conversations I've seen in quite some time. At the end, Lane Kiffin said, "Look, Paul, you helped get me fired at USC, which obviously worked out for me. But at the end of the day, you said what you said, and let's just move forward." And I think Lane absolutely handled it perfectly yesterday. Paul is the one that looked odd during that conversation. But, yeah, the national media has been all in on Ole Miss. So many are talking about the over-unders 9.5. Everybody's picking over on this. I think you and I have talked about 11-1 or 10-2 is the floor for this Ole Miss team. And the national media is all over Ole Miss. I think the preseason poll that came out from the media, I think, Stephen, Ole Miss is number 4 behind Alabama, Texas, and Georgia. So, it's just one of those things. I think Ole Miss is picked very high, and I think everything went really well yesterday.
Yeah, and one thing's pretty interesting. Like, they had the panel of the SEC media people talking about, it's like, hey, who are the SEC playoff locks? And they're like, yeah, well, they go over to Roman Harper, and he's like, Ole Miss, Texas, and Georgia. And the next one, Ole Miss, Texas, and Georgia. And everybody says, like, wait, where's Alabama? And it's a weird situation to where the SEC media days were happening, and everybody was not ignoring that Alabama exists, but putting Ole Miss just matter-of-factly above them. And I just had to take a deep breath watching that.
A lot of it has to do with the fact that Nick Saban is no longer the head coach at Alabama. Nick was there yesterday and had the funny story about how he had to have a credential to get in and that sort of thing. But, with Kalen DeBoer, the new head coach at Alabama, a lot of unknowns. And, Alabama's got a tough schedule, just like everyone in the SEC does. You've got Oklahoma and Texas now coming into the league. It's going to completely change things in so many different ways. But until Kalen DeBoer proves himself as Alabama's head coach, those are huge shoes to fill with Nick Saban now not blowing the whistle anymore and now behind the camera. So it was just a little bit different seeing him. And you talk about Nick Saban, and I thought Lane Kiffin was very open and honest about Nick Saban, talking about how much he meant to him whenever he gave him the opportunity when he had some some tough points during his life, giving an opportunity to be that offensive coordinator, winning the national championship as the OC to Alabama, and how grateful he was, and how he was very open by the fact by saying how much he appreciated Nick Saban giving him that opportunity, specifically after the passing of his father, thanking Nick Saban. Also had a very sentimental moment with Hugh Freeze, the former Ole Miss coach, when he said how grateful he was for the message he received from Hugh Freeze. That wasn't coach speak. He really meant that. And there have been a lot of people that have come out and supported Lane Kiffin, specifically after the passing of his father, Monty Kiffin. Kiffin, one of the preeminent coaches in the NFL, the Tampa 2, one of the best defensive coaches out there. He's a member of the Tampa Bay Ring of Honor. And so many people were giving condolences to Lane Kiffin. And you could tell this was a different Lane Kiffin than we saw a couple of years ago at SEC Media Day. I'm not going to say he wasn't as brash, but he feels more polished. He feels more confident in his team. He's more confident behind the mic. And I think he's more grateful, if that's the right word to use. He felt like this is a great opportunity. And most importantly, he said it before, Steven, we heard from Lane Kiffin after Ole Miss lost to Georgia, we just don't have the players. We got to do a better job recruiting. We've got to do a better job on the sidelines coaching. What we heard from Lane Kiffin at SEC Media Days, it feels like they have the roster to compete. He said all along, we've got everybody on paper. We've got a great team on paper. Now we have to perform on the field. He's rectified that from the Georgia game for the most part.
Thanks for making this the first listen of the Locked On Ole Miss podcast every day. Thank you very much for that. When we come back, Nick Saban said the difference in this Ole Miss team and Ole Miss teams in the past will be line play, and says Ole Miss has the guys to compete with Georgia and Alabama this year. We'll talk about that in just a second. But first, I do want to let you know, passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every single time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make the car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all of that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you each and every single day to bring you the biggest stories without all of that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also, this football season, look for a 24/7 streaming channel of Locked On NFL and a 24 streaming channel of Locked On College Sports, where yours truly should be populating that nearly every single day as well. Now, Brad Logan joining us today. Now, he talked about Ole Miss in the Georgia game and the decision, hey, Ole Miss's roster just doesn't look right from a size-speed ratio. We need to go out and rectify that. They go out and get Diego Pounds, Princely and Ellen, Walter Nolan. Nick Saban yesterday said, in years past, where you beat Ole Miss is on the line of scrimmage. That's how you beat Ole Miss. They had skill players for days. You beat them on the line of scrimmage. Nick Saban said this year they look like the Georgias and the Alabamas in the world. What say you, Brad?
I think that's a good call. The question, and we'll talk at the end of the season, can Ole Miss sustain this success? I don't know that we'll see a roster this talented. I've said on this show many times that I think this is the most talented roster on paper, Steven, we've seen in our lifetime. Will it be this talented down the road? I don't know. That's something we'll have to wait and see. Walker Jones and the Ole Miss, the Grove Collective, have been phenomenal securing talent for this Ole Miss football team. I don't know that changes going forward. So I think this kind of a wait and see mode. But I agree with Coach Saban. I think Ole Miss is on talent level, I think, with everyone across the board. I think that's why you're seeing Ole Miss so highly ranked in the preseason polls. And we'll get into it as the season gets here, but there are a couple of games I think that Ole Miss needs to put a lot of emphasis on and not name Georgia. I mean, there are some opportunities down the road where Ole Miss could slip up and lose. But I haven't seen a roster like Ole Miss is going to be 3 deep across that defensive front in the history of the program. 3 deep.
If you are under the age of 65, probably, you have never seen a roster at Ole Miss this talented.
No, not at all. When you start talking about some of the players that you talked about, and we didn't talk about Pooh Paul, who, linebacker has been a position that Ole Miss has struggled with the last couple of years. Now they've got depth at linebacker. They've got depth in the secondary. They've went to the portal and pretty much secured as much defensive line talent as Ole Miss has had in a while. So many years Ole Miss has been, you know what? They're great at linebacker. They're great at defensive back, but they're really struggling at defensive tackle. Well, all of a sudden now you've got, they're really good at defensive line. They just don't have any linebackers at all, and secondary is okay. There's always been a couple of positions that have been really good and then one position that really lacks behind. I can't say that about the defense this year, offensively either. And the good news is so many people says, well, Ole Miss can do this if they still stay healthy in this position. With the exception of maybe defensive back and quarterback, I don't think you can say that. There's so much depth at every position. And I guess we can make an argument that it's knock on wood, something happened to Jackson Dart. Austin Simmons could slide in. But Jackson Dart is the straw that stirs the drink. He's the main ingredient for this team. So you keep him healthy, everyone else I think they could fill in should an injury happen. This is going to be a special team, and it's going to be fun to watch in a couple of weeks.
A couple of days I did a show on Jackson Dart's leadership, and Lane Kiffin in his press conference yesterday said if EA's College Football 25 had a leadership rating, Jackson would be a 99. And I was talking about how special of a young man that Ole Miss has in Jackson Dart, in his leadership ability, all of the talent that he has. He has this magnetic personality of somebody you want to follow. He is extremely clutch. He's basically the 5-tool leader out there. And I think that Ole Miss is going to go as far as Jackson Dart takes them.
That's a great point. And I thought it was interesting that Lane Kiffin made that comment about the leadership aspect. We know how good Jackson Dart is running this offense. So many people ask me, Brad, he's not very high on any draft boards. And I said, you know what? I'm not Mel Kiper. I don't know what he's going to do in the NFL. But I'll say this, from running the offense, from the quarterback that Ole Miss needs running its team, you could not ask for a better quarterback. And now that we've heard Lane Kiffin talk about the leadership aspect, that only adds to how much he means to this team. I think he's a phenomenal quarterback. I think he's going to go down in history as one of the best to spin it for Ole Miss. He's a 5-tool quarterback. He's one that can kind of do it all. And, he was really banged up last year. And specifically, if you'll remember, Steven, in the Egg Bowl, he could not hardly walk on that ankle. But we've been told –
he couldn't lift his arm above his shoulder.
He had a lot of problems.
Yeah.
And during the offseason, we've been told that he absolutely completely is 100% healthy. And I was told 100%. So that says a lot. At one point during the season, Steven, there was an Instagram or a TikTok video to where he actually was on a one of those scooter things and had his leg, and one of those busted up ankles in a boot. So he went through a lot, and he's going to go through a lot this year. But here's what I tell Ole Miss fans when they start talking about the schedule. Just take a chance and look at Texas' schedule. Look at Georgia's schedule. Look at LSU's schedule. I get it. Everyone's going to have tough seasons. Everyone's going to have tough roads. But I think at the end of the day, there are going to be a ton of teams at 10-2. I really believe that. I think Ole Miss is going to be one of those teams, and I think there's a chance, and I think you've said it too, that Ole Miss could be 11-1 if things fall right. If Ole Miss can get past Georgia, then it allows itself to fall in one of the other games, whether it be at LSU or hosting Oklahoma. That Georgia game is going to be big for Ole Miss. I think if they can do what they need to do, got an opportunity to face a Florida team where we don't know how they're going to be on the road at 11 o'clock. You've got an Arkansas team that things are kind of up in the air. And then you got that game at South Carolina. If things are like they're supposed to be, I'm kind of leaning more now towards an 11-1 Ole Miss team when I was really kind of a 10-2 a couple of weeks ago. But what I saw yesterday, I see a very focused team and a defense led by Jared Ivey. Should be a very, very big year for Ole Miss.
Yeah, and interesting on the 11-1 loom prediction for this season. If you think about it, that's just chalk because at kickoff, Ole Miss are probably going to be a favorite in 11 of the 12 games.
Yeah, the only game, Stephen, I would caution is the LSU.
The LSU game, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if they'll be a favorite at home against Georgia.
No,
see.
That's the one I was thinking was underdog.
Yeah. So those are two games. And here's one thing I will tell you before we leave today. One thing Lane Kiffin has done perfectly at Ole Miss is he has not lost games he's supposed to win. There were two that he lost. One was against Arkansas whenever he was flirting with Auburn, and two was Mississippi State the next week whenever nobody knew what was going to happen, and the team was just kind of – and then, Stephen, they went for two to tie the game against State and didn't get it, of course, and Mississippi State wins, and Mike Leach, wins his last game as a coach. So that's only two games in the history of Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss that they have lost when they were supposed to win. Otherwise, he wins those games. If it goes to chalk, Ole Miss is at least 10-2 and probably 11-1.
And speaking of what, you brought up that Mississippi State game from 2022. That was the game. That was the moment where Jackson Dart grew up and became Jackson Dart. His 99-yard touchdown drive to take Ole Miss down the field to set up that 2-point conversion, which, hey, that was just a great play by the State player. That wasn't anybody's fault there. But that 99-yard drive in the rain, in the wind, to take that team downfield, we saw the beginning of what could be with Jackson Dart and how clutch he was.
Yeah, he did. He grew up. And, Matt Corral, he had a game like that too. You had the Auburn game to where he kind of came back out of the locker room and everyone kind of rallied around him. And you look back in the history of Ole Miss when they had really good seasons, whether it be Chad Kelly, whether it be Bo Wallace, whether it be insert quarterback here, Eli Manning, they all had moments in their career when you thought, that's it. He's got it. He's the guy that's going to lead this team. I think that's a good call on Jackson Dart. He had some great moments last year when he ran over the defensive back at Georgia Tech when everyone was like, or the year before last, and they're like, yep, that's the quarterback Ole Miss needs going forward. So there are definitely some moments during his tenure, and that's definitely one for me.
When Dart ran over that defensive back from Georgia Tech, I thought right then, it's like, this is over. Luke Altmaier has to transfer at that point because Jackson Dart has won the job.
Yeah, and I thought it was fair, the way Lane handled that it wasn't much of a controversy, but I think he was being fair to Luke. He was being fair to the process. And, I think that answered that question very quickly. And now here we are a couple of years later, and Ole Miss is playing, Steven, I think it's okay to say this. Ole Miss is playing for a national championship this year.
Yep. And on my show, I've been saying this. It's okay for everybody to talk about this and have those expectations because honestly, if you don't, it's an insult to Jackson Dart and Jared Ivey and those guys that came in to do this. If there's like naysayers in the background of what's going on in the same old Ole Miss fans, this is going to be a different type year for an Ole Miss fan base. But I do think that Ole Miss fans need to enjoy it because honestly, Brad, this is like people yours and my age. This is the year we've been waiting on. It
is. And it's one to where, we've heard from the administration. I know you've heard from Keith Carter as well as I have about how the tickets are being there are not a lot of tickets left and how the student allocation is going to be and season tickets are sold out. We've heard the stories about how, hey, by the way, I just got an email saying that I'm selecting my parking tomorrow at 1:00, but parking was sold out last week. So, there's going to be no parking. West Jackson's going to be a parking lot from Thursday to Sunday for the next foreseeable future whenever football kicks off. Those are all the things that come with having an incredible season. The Grove's going to be packed. And, I posted a video of the band in the Grove. And so many people enjoy hearing the band and, the pregame in the Grove. All of that is just going to be magnified this year with how this season is going to play out. It starts out perfectly. You kind of work out some kinks the first couple of weeks against some lower division opponents, lower level opponents, and you can really work some things out. You get a tough road test against Wake Forest. Stephen, we've seen the tapes of the 07 and the 08 Wake Forest game in which Ole Miss had that game won, Dexter McCluster and Jevin Sneed, and then Wake Forest goes the length of the field and then kicks the field goal. They've got to exercise some demons from about 15, 16 years ago. But it's a good road test for Ole Miss. They're better than Wake Forest, but it gives them an opportunity to play on the road, get some things worked out. schedule worked out perfectly. They did a great job with this schedule to get this team ready for that championship run.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Brad, what is the status of the Inside the Rebels meet and greets that you have set up around the state, and what's going on there? Let people know.
First 2 weeks of August is going to be Tuesday and Thursday. You're obviously welcome to any of our events. We'd love to have you. We're going to have one in Van Cleve at the Shed. We're going to have one in Jackson at the Keg House, one in Oxford. David's working on that location, and one in Cleveland, Mississippi at Crawdaddy's. Well, it's actually in Marigold, which is outside of Cleveland, Mississippi. So we had a great turnout last year, so David and I elected to go across the state this year. There'll be a graphic come out hopefully later this week with our dates kind of locked out, and there'll be a link to go on and purchase tickets. We're going to have former Rebels that played for Ole Miss are going to show up and be some of our speakers, and we're just going to talk about Ole Miss football and how excited we are for the season. So appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about that, and we're excited about it.
Yeah, I just know that Ole Miss fans are excited to get together and talk Ole Miss sports whenever they can. And my meet and greet that I had at Walk-Ons in Ridgeland, I had probably between 40 and 50 people there, and it just absolutely blew me away. So, I mean, this is the point is this is the most anticipated season in the history of Ole Miss football. And honestly, if we're content providers like me and Brad and everybody else, we need to maximize where we can.
Yeah, there's no doubt. This is the opportunity from a sponsorship standpoint, and people that wanted to be a part of anyone's networks, and you know, depending on who you work for and what you do, this is a great opportunity for content, and people are latching on to it. I think you're seeing it in your numbers. They're through the roof, and you know, I'm blessed where my numbers are doing well. So this is a great opportunity, and it's been a lot of fun for sure.
All right, take care, buddy. We'll talk to you later.
All right, thank you.